Almost 2 years ago, I changed my job after being at the same place for almost 20 years. Um, it is quite difficult actually once you have stayed in one place for so long. And yes, it's about skills in your resume and staying up to date. Those are the obvious conventional reasons. But there's also another one, psychological. You have become so part of that current environment with the bad and the good and everything and you have accepted it almost as your reality. That is actually very difficult and slow process to disentangle. In fact, I started almost 2 years before I was able to change jobs to disentangle myself in my head first from the current place. And so if you are contemplating changes, regardless of whether you're a young adult coming fresh out of college, although for you probably haven't been at one place for so long, but still it's the first time finding your own job, or maybe a more mature adult, career switchers. I have helped a lot of students in the past, somewhere in their late 20s, early 30s. There's a moment in life, it's a natural breaking point for all of us where we sit and say, what do we do? For some people, it might appear less drastic than others. For myself, I finished my PhD and I was like, now what? I did not want to be in academia. I did not want to continue doing research. I liked academia. So I had to do a lot of brainstorming back then. But you could also be a mid-level career person, unsatisfied with your job, or maybe reading the writings on the wall that there are changes coming up for all of us, from the world being so unsettled, but also from AI, technological developments, or it could be a person considering retirement. In any situations, there's several natural points in our life cycle, especially in those 30, 40 years when we're active and we work, where a natural point comes for us to say, okay, it's a branching point. Do I stick with what it is, or do I want to do something new? Most of the times my gut tells me most of the times the new is better, because if you're already thinking that something is not working, most likely something is not working. But the topic today, what I wanted to discuss, is really how to begin that process. Because you can polish your resume and you can go and find another job. It might be difficult in this environment with the world unsettled and AI technological revolution just around the corner, or actually we're in the midst of it. But as difficult as it is to find that job, there's something even more difficult, and that is the task of disentangling yourself psychologically from what has been so far and being open to the new. And the reason why is because you can find your job, and I've seen this with several people that I helped, or at least witnessed their process of going through new jobs, and they went through one job after another within 2 to 3 years. And the reason is because every time they saw that old patterns began to emerge very quickly within the new situation. So this is where you recognize that there isn't as psychological aspect to that. So how do you begin to disentangle from your old ways of thinking? For me, the best, but again, it took some time. The most effective way was actually I came across a spiritual practice that resonated with me, and I felt like that was my practice. Before that, I had read a lot of literature, East, West, Buddhists, Taoists, Hindu, Vedanta, and it's all good, and then you're stumped because you have to pay tons of money, thousands of dollars, to go to a retreat or travel across the world, and there's always someone out there better than you, a guru, to come and teach you. And so there were a lot of reasons why it didn't work. Even if you get the money and even if you go to the retreat, what happens the moment you come back? You're right in the smack of daily life, with daily pressures, with jobs and family, and stresses and bosses. And in my experience, those retreats don't really help us very much. They can give you a boost, but in the end of the day, you have to find your own path that is sustainable and repeatable right in the smack of your daily life. A practice that can pop up in the most unexpected moment when you're stressing out and your boss is putting pressure on you at work, or you're fretting that you cannot find a job. And so that worked for me, but it actually came as a complement of everything else. So this might turn out into a series of videos about how to make decisions and how to move on and find opportunities, spot them, grab them, and actually make the best of those opportunities, be they jobs or retirement. And I'll start first with some more conventional tricks that well, none of my tricks really are always completely conventional. I like to straddle, and I like to actually blend both worlds, conventional and alternative, the spiritual world, because why not? Why not make the best of both worlds? You know, this is how you have your cake and eat it too. So the tip for today, the decisions. Everybody has to make decisions. How do you know which one is correct? And I know. Today I wake up and I say, okay, this is how I'm going to go. And tomorrow, no, it's the other way. And the day after, no, this way. And I still continue to play that. Even at my current job, I have to make decisions every day. Do I create first a physics course, or do I create math course? And then one day is physics, and then the next day is math, and then it's physics, and then it's math. So regardless of what your choices are, I always like to sleep on those choices. To me, that was such an obvious thing, and we even have an expression, sleep on your decision. But it amazes me how few people actually do it, because literally that is how I have had my best decisions all my life. Even when the decision comes out early, sleeping on it gives you that space when you wake up in the morning and you know it in your bones. So what does sleeping on a decision means? First of all, you do have to do your groundwork. Do your pro and con table. What is the best? What is the worst? Or what are the benefits of this choice? What are the benefits of that choice? Sometimes when I was looking for my first job, I had no ideas. I didn't even know enough to do pro and con tables. So the important thing is that you focus your mind on the problem at hand. Pro and con tables, what are the benefits and the drawbacks of each of those decisions, are simply the vehicles to get your mind focused on the problem at hand. And the best part is to do it before you go to bed. So don't go watch TV, don't go watch your favorite show. The reason comes, well, I've always felt it because I always did it intuitively. I've always known it kind of innately. And I thought everybody knew, but apparently not. Until many decades later, I actually came across some facts from neuroscience and cognitive psychology. So if you want to hear the spiritual argument, you set up those ruminations and reflections before bed, because you're going to connect with your higher guides, your spiritual guides, your higher self through the night. So you want to make that request for them to help you out. If you like the conventional answer, it comes from cognitive psychology and neuroscience. Before bed, And there's studies about that wherever you focus your brain power, the brain continues to process even when you go to sleep. So let's say 5 seconds before you finally doze off and, go to those sleep realms, you're thinking about, what do I want to do with myself? Do I take this job, or do I take that job, or do I wait out for the third even better job? What do I do? You want that to be there. And the reason is, when you fall asleep in the conventional scientific way, your brain continues to process links from memories, from perception that you might have seen and then ignored or forgot to think, forgot that you even saw it. So there's a lot of stuff in the subconscious, there's a lot of stuff in the brain that we're not fully conscious of what is going on, and that process continues. So there's the theory, spiritual or conventional, whichever way you like. The fact remains, though, and this is where you can be the scientist in your life. The fact remains that no amount of theory is good unless you get some direct validation, and your validation will come from the morning. That is where you keep your notebook or your phone. I have an app on the phone, so when you wake up, the first thing you hop on your phone, not for scrolling videos, news, social media, whatever, but to hop on your journaling app and record everything that comes your way. Don't censor it, because you're not expecting anything. Don't expect coherent solutions. Don't expect anything complete. It's more like ideas and associations. The best part is when you're not completely fully awake. You're awake enough to be somewhat operational, not yet there to drive your car or do high risk activities, but enough to, go to the restroom, get a glass of water, that type of awakeness. And you don't even have to get up the bed, just write those ideas. What is it? And if you actually set up your intent, I'll call it intent, because that is what it was the previous night. If you set up that tone of the night for processing, I want a job, what do I want to do, how shall I go about it, there will be some ideas that are gonna start emerging on the morning. And they might not be go here and this is your job, but it will be, for me, what happened the first time I was looking for a job. I was 29 and I was finishing my PhD, and my advisor kindly and generously allowed me to push my graduation date and my defense until I figure out what I wanted to do and find myself a job. So I had something to do and I was paid modestly, but it was pretty good for a graduate student in physics. So there was not that much pressure for me to really start paying the bills. My bills were paid, but there was a clock ticking for me. And it took me about 3 nights. I remember every night I would be like, I don't know. What do I want to do? I knew I didn't want to do research. So once you decide what you don't want, there's no need of dwelling on what you don't want anymore, because that kind of gets you into a negative loop. It's very unproductive. I don't want this. Okay, great. But then what? So focus on really, what is it? What is it that you want? You don't even need to know. You just have to be open. And that has to be at night, the last thought before you going to bed. Not about what you're going to wear, what your breakfast will be, what your show was, none of that. You brush your teeth, go to bed, and you say, okay, what do I want? So fall asleep with that thought. And it took me 3 nights, so be patient. I remember the first night I woke up and I didn't even remember about my experiment. And the second night, again, I got up and went about with my usual day. And then on the third night in the morning, I woke up and I said, oh my goodness, why not teach? You like to talk. You're usually good at explaining complex concepts. I know in the hindsight, because so many people say I want to teach, it doesn't sound such a breakthrough moment. And while I wanted and I always liked teaching, I never thought that I can actually make a living through teaching. So it was never on my radar, teaching. It's like, yeah, right, whatever. And definitely no high school teacher for me. And again, this is where you have to know yourself. But the third night was that, wow, some qualitative change happened, which reminds me of the ancient Chinese book, the Book of Changes, or you might have heard about it. It's called I Ching, and there is a hexagram number 18, which is working on what has been spoiled. It sounds somewhat negative, but in fact it's one of the most positive hexagrams. I like to study those 64 hexagrams, and it is the situation in which you have been given opportunity to remedy your past mistakes. And I remember there's a paragraph in many of the translations in which the I Ching book, that specific text on the 18 hexagram, counsels: reflect for 3 days before you make a decision, make the decision, and then reflect for another 3 days, observe what happens. And it made such a striking impact on me, because the 3 days is usually my period of getting breakthroughs. I've had them fast sometimes, but 3 days is kind of like, in the past, it's that average period that if I'm patient, I keep my focus, I will get an answer. It might not be the final answer, but it will be the next crumb in your path towards what you want to do and be.